appreciation. Yeah. Thank you, Stephen. You delivered again. Fantastic. When we were designing today's format, we were very intentional at the order of this. So if you follow with me, we've got Stephen Harrington. Fantastic job laying out the statistics, the trends, the recommendations. This next panel is a panel of past CEOs of the year with one sub in, Sue, I'm not forgetting about you. So what you're going to now hear is a lot of that theory and practicality really, rubber hits the road here. And to lead that panel, we've got this is a high-powered panel. We have to find the right moderator. And oh my God, did we find the right moderator when we thought of Craig. Craig, I'm building you up here, man. When we found out Craig, 5 Global Financial Times Financial Post. He's also a past 40 Under 40 recipient. He has a great podcast. I'm tuned in and listening on a regular basis, Craig. And we lost him here. He was an Ottawa guy, went to Toronto, and he came to his senses and came back to Ottawa. Give it up for Craig Dowden. He'll introduce our panel. And Craig, we'll take the panel to 2:15.
Hello, everyone. How you doing? Wow, that was a little muted. I'm from Newfoundland, so come on. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, applause. And I'm actually going to do this. I have no idea why, but I'm going to do this like The Price is Right. And to introduce the panel members. So it's my absolute pleasure to be moderating this panel. Love having conversations around talent. Stephen did such a great job in setting the stage and so much data and relevant data for each of us as business leaders. So the first panelist I'm going to introduce, I do feel like Bob Barker, I guess. Catherine Tremblay is a Canadian entrepreneur and staffing enthusiast with over 30 years of experience specializing in the human aspect of human resources. As CEO and co-founder of Altus Recruitment and Altus Technology, 2 specialized brands that together form one of Canada's largest independent recruitment firms, Catherine has dedicated her entire career toward the betterment of the staffing process. With offices in Ottawa, Toronto, and Vancouver, Catherine has been named the CEO of the Year in 2021 by the Ottawa Business Journal and the Ottawa Board of Trade, and recognized for running one of Canada's best managed companies at the Platinum Club level by Deloitte. Welcome, Catherine. So good. And I forgot the come on down. Okay. So now John Sicard assumed the role of President and Chief Executive Officer of Kinaxis in January 2016. Nearly 30 years tenure at Kinaxis. John first started at the company as a key contributor to the architecture and development of Kinaxis' supply chain management solutions in early 1994, and has since held a number of senior management roles in development, professional services, business consulting, sales, marketing, and customer support. In 2020, John was named CEO of the Year by the Ottawa Board of Trade and Ottawa Business Journal. And for me, I'm a very kind of rudimentary drummer, but he's a lifelong drummer. John has a passion for music and enjoys producing music as well as playing with his band, Open Channel D. So welcome. And I missed the come on down again. And then last but not least, Sue Ivy, come on down. There's a car for you and for you. Sue was appointed CHRO of Calian in 2019. She joined the organization in 1999, gaining progressive management experience and a deep understanding of the company's diverse business by working within its service lines. She joined the HR team in 2014 and drove key HR initiatives such as leadership development, business unit partnership, and compensation strategies. So a huge round of applause for our panel here today. And I just did an abbreviated bio, so please use the full the code to access. And I'm going to stand. I feel really weird. I'm kind of hello everyone. I'm going to ask some questions of the panel. I'd love to. I'm from Newfoundland originally, so my goal is to turn this into a Newfoundland kitchen party. So if people do want to contribute, please raise hands, do a silly dance, because we'd love to take advantage of these amazing chief executives and on the stage. So my opening question is, just had this phenomenal presentation around talent, and in the different CEO mastermind forums that I facilitate and all the different circles that I'm a part of, there's such a conversation. So what I'd like to start the question with is, what stood out to you in terms of Stephen's presentation, or what's a top, burning talent question or issue that you keep thinking about? So who wants to go first?
Well, I'll start. Is it on? Can you hear me? Oh, good. So on my mind is around productivity and measuring productivity and the difficulty that leaders have today around, well, both remote work productivity and on-site. It doesn't matter where you are. Are you engaged and are you productive? And when you look at the data of, let's say 150 years ago, and people worked 3,000 hours in a year, that's 60 hours a week, 50 weeks a year. And now we're at about 1,500. Well, what keeps happening as we improve technology and the productivity rates change and are half of that of the US? Where does that go for us as Canadians? And that's really on my mind.
John.
Yeah, so about 6 months before COVID hit, we were breaking ground on a brand new building. And so when this pandemic hit, let's just say from that very first day to even now, I'm studying this phenomenon and learning from as many people as I can. And there's a couple of things I've come to appreciate. Number one, this isn't about the edges. It's not about everyone should be together all the time. I think we've pretty much realized that we can be a lot more efficient. It's better for the planet. There's so many, positives with having some flexibility. But it's equally not about permanent isolation. I think permanent isolation is not meant for humans. It's just not. And so I sometimes get into a debate about that with people who say, but I'm more productive at work, to which I say it's not about you. And also the convenience argument, it's just more convenient. Fast food is convenient, but you can't eat at McDonald's every day. So convenience isn't necessarily healthy. So I think the debate, and what I got from Stephen's presentation is, it's really one of the, where in the middle do you want to be? Because you want the benefits of flexibility without forfeiting the negative effects of isolation.
Awesome. Sue.
Yes, and all of the above, and engagement. So when we look at engagement and we look at some of the technology that is coming, it's the level of engagement, and whether it's working from home or it's talent shortages or it is interacting with new technology. How do we ensure that our teams are engaged and productive and performing to their best? And how do we support our teams in this new world to really maximize that piece?
Oh, that's awesome. And were you gonna?
No, I just said well said.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, when he asked me to moderate this panel today and told me about, this is Ottawa's top talent thinkers, practitioners, executives, leaders, really want to equip them with the best possible insights around the talent cycle. So I'd love to walk through that with each of you. And let's start on the recruitment side. So when you're recruiting talent, and Stephen did a great job talking about what employees are looking for and that talent landscape, what are the ways in which you're looking to engage with potential top talent, and what are the key strategies you find are working really well in terms of integrating them into the organization?
It's a massive question. I think
I thought I'd go small.
There are at least 10 questions within that. I think we could spend a lot of time on recruitment. On our end, what we're seeing is really this where people work. I mean, I hate to continue in this debate. It seems like it's all we talk about is where people work. But what we're seeing is that our employers and our clients want more on-site. And the employee who's looking for work wants to work remotely. And I mean, it's so fundamental, but before we used to negotiate compensation, and that's all we talked about was counter offers and compensation. Sure, that's a portion, but a better portion of our time is spent on the flexibility. And with the younger generation coming in, although you were telling me that the younger generation in your workplace are coming in on site more so, what we're seeing is that the younger generation is saying we want to be in full control and fully autonomous. We want career pathing, but we want to do it on our own. We want to do it from home. So we're definitely, that's what we're seeing a lot on the recruitment front.
Yeah, I'll add maybe, at least for Kinaxis, and it feels like we're perpetually hiring. We always look for people who care about why they work, not where they work, and so we start with our own why. Why does Kinaxis matter? What makes us significant? What journey are we on? Can we bond on that before bonding on, so how do I work for you? And where do I, because if you can't bond on the why, then the rest really doesn't matter, to me anyway. When people have come to me saying, well, I really enjoy working remote, great. We have a hybrid solution for you. Again, it's all about talking about the middle. But I also think part of the recruitment process is to be exceptionally clear as to why you have a hybrid approach. It's not about productivity, in fact. I mean, if you lead with productivity, you're going to have an upward battle, I think. When I describe the rationale, well, let me give you a couple. I've got so many now after 2 years of thinking about this, but here's one. And it wasn't mine. It was a conversation I had with the CEO of Eaton, Craig Arnold, a company of 100,000 people. And he told me his number one worry around societies was this notion of isolation. He said, we've made more progress in DEI in the last 10 years than we've made in the last 100. And his point to me was that it's largely because you don't get to pick the people you work with generally. You come to work and there's all different manner of humans, right, working there. And the problem with isolation is you tend to go back and hang around the people that are just like you. And with social media, monetizing rage culture, tearing us apart every day, his worry is that we're actually going to diminish our gain in less than 10 years. And he's African American. He speaks from a lens I don't have, but he said it much more eloquently when I was with him. But that's an example of the potential risk that exists when you go purely to one side versus the other. You start forgetting what is it you're going to forfeit 7 years from now, not 7 months from now, 7 years from now. And I think as leaders, part of our job is to have the courage to have those conversations with people so that they know if you have this kind of a work environment, you're going hybrid and this is why, and you highlight all the things you're working to keep, right? There's certainly side effects to isolation that you're trying to avoid. I think that's, potential employees really love the clarity.
I love that. Sue.
Yes. Well, it started out as such a big question. And I think one of the reasons why, Catherine, you talked about, really getting into the debate, continuing the debate about the whole concept of hybrid, work from home, whatever it is. It sort of feels, I think, to many in the market like the question isn't over. It's not, many of us have not been definitive. And so it's just this continuing conversation about what it's going to be. I think this is an excellent point. And so as we continue to sort of look at it from our own perspective at Calian, I think one of the things that we have prioritized is really understanding what makes our top talent click and being purposeful in that connection. I think you hit the whole concept of, society is not meant to sort of, individuals are not meant to be alone. And this is one of the main elements that we're seeing with our workforce is you can only be at home so much before it starts to really potentially be a challenge for you. And so we have really focused on encouraging managers to create purposeful connections for their teams, and whatever that needs to look like. So maybe it's you need to come in a day a month, a lunch a month, 2 days a week. It's less about the end solution and more about what are you trying to achieve. So maybe it makes sense that you need to come in for the entire month of January because you're going to set all your priorities and you're going to do all your things and then you're going to go away with some marching orders. But for managers to really look at who is on your team, how do you create that sense of belonging? Because we know that for those that can answer that Q12 question of, I have a best friend at work, very positively, that's where you find the engagement. And when you find the engagement, you increase the productivity. And so can we all just take a moment and worry less about what it says on the paper and more about what arrangements are gonna get you that outcome?
Well, and I love this discussion, and what's interesting, and I think, Stephen, you had a statistic around this, the intentionality around people are building organizations, building teams, building talent, and a lot of times, and each of you touched on it in a different way, that if in the rush to do something, we haven't stepped back and taken the broader view around, so what are the implications of this? And the discussion around isolation, it's interesting, I had Dr. Robert Waldinger come into a CEO Mastermind Forum, so he wrote the book, The Good Life, it just came out last year. It's an 80-year study into human happiness. They've started at Harvard, tracked it for 80 years. And he said, as a social scientist, I really resist having a summary statement of a body of research this large. And he said, and I can do that. Everything about a meaningful, happy, fulfilling life, it's all about the quality of the relationships you have, full stop. So one question he was pondering, said, I'm not going to get into this in terms of return to office and different pieces, but that, the social cohesion, the relationships, how we relate, how we connect, something to think about as we move forward. I'm going to throw to the audience shortly, so I'm giving you some time to think about who wants to ask a question to this amazing panel. And I'm going to go in reverse order each time we're coming back. So one of the, again, so many fascinating data points in Stephen's presentation. One of them was around, so what people are looking for, and it's development. And then also talking about skills. So I'm really curious to hear from each of you about, so how are you going about developing, enhancing skills, what you're thinking through at this time when it comes to talent?
That's a great question. We at Calian have been very focused on developing our leaders and in developing some of the competencies that we see as very important to move the business forward. So lots of things on, facilitating teams and communication skills and being able to work across diverse teams. So we've been looking at it fairly broadly, and then trying to come at it from various angles to find our way through. Yeah.
John.
You know, I've been thinking about this, and we were just chatting about this, Catherine and I, just before, that very recently, like within weeks, I've sent a note to the hiring manager saying I want to start focusing on aptitude. I think something strange happened during the pandemic when everybody thought, we can hire from anywhere now. And so there was this massive push towards skill being everything. And you'd hire for skill first because you could find skills anywhere. And aptitude sort of took a little bit of a back seat. And again, these are the types of decisions you make and you think they're right and you don't know what the long-term implications are. Until someone with extreme aptitude reminds you what happens when you hire somebody that races to the front in a very short period of time because of the relationships. I think there was a woman who stood up saying, the accidental collisions. I mean, this is a question most people don't think about. How did you become the person you are? How did you become the leader you are? Nobody wakes up every day and assesses that. It's through hundreds, if not thousands, of accidental collisions in relationships. And I think this is where we were talking about this, our younger generation now. When I look at the people, and we've been monitoring this, the people who come into the office are between the ages of 20 and 35. These are people who are trying to build careers. They're trying to figure out, how did we become who we are? Well, I don't know, but I know it wasn't through isolation, right? So two things. One, making sure that we're really clear on aptitude as I'd say an attribute. And I know it's hard. Catherine is an expert in this field. She goes, how do you do that? I'm like, I actually don't know. I just know I want it. So, and it's not to say that skill isn't important. It's just focus on aptitude and celebrate people who who show that enthusiasm, that drive, and accelerate, because I think that's contagious. You know, that's a good contagion. Let's just say when you see it. So anyway, that's our focus.
Well, from a learning and development standpoint, what we've switched to is to have groups learning together. We used to have people start, and individually the leader would train the individual. So I'm actually speaking a little bit more from the Altus side, is we're bringing groups together of 10 and 15 people who start on the same day and creating a cohort to reduce the loneliness. And to have them work together subject by subject, but in much shorter segments. We find that with TikTok and with everyone on the shortest forms of learning, that we used to be able to train people for 2 hours at a time. And now we find in 15-minute segments we get something through, and then we might work on a case study and work through it as a coaching experience in a smaller segment, because it no longer works to put people in a room for 2 hours and I'm talking at them. No one wants to be talked at anymore. And not that we ever did. Okay, I'm not trying to pretend that anybody in this room wanted to be talked at. But there was really, when we all started our careers, most of us sat in a room and were told what to do and how to think. And there's just a distinction now of people wanting to do case studies and much more active coaching. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what you said about just the leader development. It's very difficult right now to train leaders on how to navigate mental health and how to navigate diversity and inclusion, use the right language and the appropriate distinctions that exist, and to really welcome newcomers and to make an impact there. And so leaders are faced with just so many difficulties around that. And so we have these new Coaches Academy, and instead of focusing on the more senior leader, we're really looking more at the coaching level of how a coach shows up to be a mentor to each other. You're a mentor to many, and you are both mentors to many. And it really is a lot about fostering that mentorship really early on for people in their career.
Love it. Okay, so now this is the time you've all been waiting for, and I couldn't have asked you for a better bridge to that. Now we're going to ask the audience. Anyone in the audience have a Glenn? Awesome. In the middle there, I saw a hand go up, and anyone else wants to chime in?
Hi. My name's Kaylee. I'm a new HR graduate from Algonquin College. Thank you. And I guess kind of my question is to the social responsibility. It's a two-part question, social responsibility. So we're talking a lot about inclusion and how that's not good on a social side. However, though, my curiosity is there are people that cannot physically go into work. Are we being inclusive to the people, those needs where they may need to be at home and working? And I feel like we're really missing that part of the conversation, that inclusive part, and discussing the back to office or not back to office. We're missing a whole segment of the population that really needs to work from home. Just to get back up a little bit, I was a daycare teacher before I came into Algonquin to study, and I left the field of daycare because, well, one, it's not great financial income security for my longevity. Secondly, I have to be at work. I'm a single parent. If I'm home that day, I'm not getting paid because I can't work. So I left the field to come into HR for a number of other reasons as well too. But to be able to have that flexibility to be able to work, my concerns are for people that don't have that choice and they're stuck, having to go into the office. Everybody knows that child care is very underpaid. Is there a social responsibility to making certain segments of the job market, is there a social responsibility there? My second part of that question is, if there's people that are trauma-based, there's lots of poverty out there. A lot of the younger populations are feeling very disengaged even before they get to the workplace because of everything that's going on in the world. Is there a social responsibility to not just expect people to be, to hand in a resume and to look for work? Is there a responsibility to say, hey, I'm seeing all these people that need work and let's bring them on? Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll start. I think that, unfortunately in our world, there are some jobs that can't be done from home. And I'll tell you, during the pandemic, we all celebrated nurses and doctors, didn't we? I'm in the supply chain field. For every nurse practitioner, for every doctor, there's 10,000 at least supply chain practitioners that had to go in and keep the necessities of life flowing. And nobody celebrated them because they're in the background. They had no choice. They had to get to factories, make food, make medicines, hygiene products. Like all of those things had to keep happening, and there was no choice. So true heroes. And in some cases, you're right. There are people who they have to opt out of an opportunity like that. They can't work in a factory because they can't come in. And in some cases, you get hybrid opportunities. And I think that's why when I think about this problem, I think about it as being in the middle. There are always going to be corner cases, and the corner cases aren't where policy gets made, right? It's you look at it and say, in which conditions for your business, and in our case for the Kinaxis business, what are the types of individuals that would fit our workforce? We're not a factory, so that's a good thing. You don't have to be there at 5 o'clock in the morning and punch a clock, and it's not us. So we do have a hybrid environment, and as it relates to diversity, and at least at Kinaxis, we made a public pledge that we would hire 1% of our staff on the autism spectrum. Now, in that case, it's not just I have an autistic son, so I happen to believe it's really healthy to create the conditions for them to be around others, because one day I won't be here, and he's still hopefully going to be here, and I want him to be able to know how to carry on. So I think this comes back to businesses creating the conditions to bring about flexibility that fits their business model. Factories have none. You can't run a line, without humans being physically there. Hospitals, same thing. Although, my sister's a doctor, and so telehealth has made some great strides there. And in some cases, you can create a hybrid environment, as I've been discussing.
Well, and the conditions of the labor market today are forcing us all to be super creative. So we do actually run factory lines out in our Saskatoon locations, and acquiring talent to do that work has forced us to really look at segments of the population that we might not have previously. So we've created shifts that support mums or dads that want to be able to get their kids off in the morning, and they want to be able to collect them from the bus at the end of the day. No problem. We'll create a different shift, and you will work 6 hours a day, and everybody's happy. So, there's upside to a bit of a skill shortage because it makes us all think differently. And I think that's what's going to be important as we go forward.
Well said.
Another question from the audience. Anyone? Yeah, you see, there you go in the corner. Awesome.
Thank you very much. You talked about social isolation, and we have in our practice a number of clients who do a self-assessment called the Employment Readiness Scale. And what we're finding, and the evidence is pointing to the fact that young people actually have higher social supports because they play games and they interact with one another. And we find that our older workers with disabilities, who self-identify as living with disabilities or 45 and over, have less social supports. And social supports we know is a critical determinant for job retention. But I'm wondering, where's the evidence? We talk about isolation. Where's the evidence? Have we gathered that yet? Are there some stats around that? Because this is so new. So as a practitioner, I'm always looking for best practices. So just wondering if the panel might like to comment on that.
That was a great question. I think that the isolation piece of it may not have been fully studied yet. It's true that there's still, the outcomes of the current situation will take time. I don't actually believe that everyone who is working from home is isolated. In fact, in some ways, I feel closer to a lot of my team members today than I ever did in the past, because I am very intentional to call them up and speak with them. In July, I spoke with 50 employees intentionally to talk about pain points and issues. And in fact, in some ways, I actually think there's less isolation. So I can't tell you whether there's been a report on this or not. What I'll say is I think where you're coming from, John, is that you want to make sure that people have a network have the accidental collisions to be able to learn and create that network, but it's not essential. There are other ways to create it, which is where when I was talking about learning and development and doing it in a pod, in a group, you create your pod online. There's one person in Toronto, there's another in Calgary. That's okay. We're all kind of united in this journey of creating trust within our group. And it doesn't necessarily require seeing each other, eye to eye, So I think it's a great question. I'm not sure that I have an answer on the loneliness factor, but really interested in how the remote setting is actually causing some beautiful relationships in a different way.
Another question. Oh, there we go. The other side of the room, we're getting a workout with the microphone, so it's always good.
Yeah, I'll take it back to what interests me most, which is issues of culture and how people encounter one another, learn about one another. Robert Putnam wrote a book probably 25 years ago called Bowling Alone, and one of the things he talked about was workplace sort of bowling leagues and that, and the social power of that, and well before the internet completely took over our lives, there were already issues around deterioration of social connection, Rotary, Lions Club, a lot of the traditional ways that people connected with one another, faith communities were declining. We are where we are in a workplace setting. Again, so how do you think? How do you think about that? John asked the question about, do we think about how did we become the leader that we are? I always note that the most expensive private schools always have amazing arts and culture programs, recreation, etc., because people know that the resilience, the de-escalation of conflict, the relationship managed, the encountering one another, you learn that through that. How are we making that deliberate within our city to sort of say, how can we use culture to develop people because they are our workforce? And my experience of living 35 years in the city of Ottawa is the place is overwhelmingly tooled for white middle-class people who live in the suburbs, in terms of our recreation, our infrastructure, and we have not done an audit and a reset to really sort of say it doesn't work. We did an anti-racism strategy. I recommend people go back to it, but it's not specific enough about just what our issues are. So, any comment, or you can refute?
Yeah, well, culture's something that I think about every day. I think culture either happens by accident or on purpose. You get to choose, right? So I choose on purpose. I want culture to happen on purpose. I also think culture manifests through relationships between humans. That's, it's a kind of a spongy thing. I try to explain it in a lot of ways with our own staff by saying things like how we work together is going to be more important than what we do together. It's kind of a foundational statement for culture, how we work together, more important than what we do together. To that point of togetherness being the natural state of humanity, I think we have thousands and thousands and thousands of years of history. There's a reason why you feel stronger locking arms with a stranger when you're under duress. If you're under attack, you'd rather lock arms with a stranger than be completely alone. It's just a foundational thing about humanity. And so, I start thinking about culture this way. Could I build a culture by only having telephone calls with people? Yes. Could I build culture by having video conferences with people? Probably a better one, because now I can see a little bit of body language. Can I build an even better culture if I'm in 3 dimensions with someone? And I think that's the ultimate human experience, is when you can spend 3-dimensional time with people and you get your empathy index goes up. You care more for people you're in physical proximity with than if you're not. It's just, again, maybe I'm wrong. You're less likely to care deeply about somebody you don't know than someone you know. You're less likely to be strangers with somebody that you're interacting with in 3 dimensions, right? And so that's just simple thing, right? And so I learned this lesson from a board member a long time ago. Why is culture so important? Well, When everything is going really well, when you're on a sports team and you're winning, it's easy. It's so easy, but every team gets tested. And it's when your team gets tested, that's when you need to know who you're with. Like, not what school they went to, not what degrees they have. Like, who are they? Do I know them? Do I care deeply for their safety? And I think that's where the human bonds matter. And I mean, your point about culture, I've heard other CEOs tell me that, you know, if they prolong this isolation, there's a term, I don't know, maybe you've heard this term, culture coma. Your company turns into a culture coma because you've lost that interaction. So I think it's all part and parcel. It's all part of the equation.
Through the pandemic, one of the opportunities we've had to do, we've had the good fortune of having, and Catherine, you alluded to this, is getting to know people in a different way. And so over the last year and a half, we've spent a lot of time developing our diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging program, also something we got through our last employee engagement survey. And so we've really leaned into encouraging people to come to work as their whole selves, and we've launched a number of employee resource groups. And so completely outside of the business, we've encouraged conversations around things that employees have decided is important to them. You know, we've got a group that is looking at how to set goals and how to attain your goals, and they might be work related, they might not. We've got a group that's looking at, they call themselves the Callian quilt, and it's all about sort of different cultures and what different cultures are celebrating and what have you. And so what's so amazing about that network of employees is the connection that they're managing to build. And some of it is online because we too have taken advantage of hiring people all over this country and across the world. And I think you have to be purposeful and do both. Opportunities to meet in person, it might not be 2 days a week, it might be once a year. But taking that opportunity to just understand who is it that you're working with, how can you get to know them, and then how can you leverage that into what you're trying to accomplish.
So the next question, and we're nearing time, so this is great. Another data point that came out through Stephen's presentation was around in terms of employees leaving organizations, and that focus on mental health and burnout. Really the top question. And so I'd love to hear from each of you in terms of, and then also the C-suite executives, 70% looking for another potential opportunity in an organization that better supports their emotional well-being. What are things that you do, in terms of your own organization and also for self-care, so to really kind of drive that?
A very important question. We're hearing that 67% of women are feeling extremely stressed every day, whether they're on-site or off-site. Not to say that only women and mothers are feeling that, but your notion of burnout is so real. I've often said I wonder if burnout can sometimes be a choice in how we live. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. You asked personally, I found that having remote work more often, not necessarily every day, but more often, has allowed me to work out a lot more. And it's allowed me to be my more full self. There are days where I'm so happy in my yoga pants, I'm productive, and I'm working, and I'm fully on, but I'm really content in my yoga pants and having a workout at lunch. So it has changed my personal lifestyle. If I go to the business side, what we've done is we've implemented a flex day program where every 10th day, you can have a day that is flexible. It means you're not on screen, and it means you don't have to participate in group meetings or huddles. You basically have the opportunity to respond to something urgent, a client, a candidate, something that's a major issue, but if it's not urgent, you can go and do your thing. And so people are finding that their 10th day kind of free is really changing how they see their own performance. And then on the burnout front as well, something we've really implemented quite strongly is around maternity leave, both leaving and returning. We found a lot of our team members were very stressed about leaving on maternity or paternity leave and stressed about their return. So we've implemented a lot more programming around seeing them to the end of their pregnancies or helping them return, paying them for training time while they're on maternity leave, allowing them to participate in anything that's going on so they don't completely lose their connection. And kind of keeping them related and connected to the organization seems to reduce the burnout for when they return because they feel almost reoriented towards the organization and not struggling. So those are two things that I would add.
Thank you.
So we've talked a lot about the concept of burnout and mental health, and really encouraged some campaigns around prioritizing self-care and taking your time, and also being and one of the things that I've done is really been intentional about refocusing my personal time as personal time, and really prioritizing spending time with family and what have you. So
here we go. I participated in a 3-hour seminar about this topic. It was a tech event here in Ottawa that had an expert, and she told the group that we were in that clinical burnout, not just burnout, but clinical burnout was up 15% since the start of the pandemic. And the thesis, and I'm not an expert in this, but it kind of makes sense. Everybody experiences work stress, and it's different than home stress. The stresses of living your life at your home are going to be different. Maybe they're financial, or your children, or anything. Could be anything. But your home stress is different from your work stress. And the challenge with, at least the thesis was, when you're working at home all the time in perpetuity, these aren't additive, they're multiplicative. And the reason is because you can't commiserate with the cohort that is also experiencing the work stress. And this was particularly true in the police force, where there's a tremendous amount of stress. And they were, they weren't going to the pub or the restaurant or whatever. And so that commiseration wasn't occurring, and you weren't shedding any of that stress. That had nothing to do with home stress. Fascinating. Anyway, so what we did after that event, and I would encourage the leaders in the room to think about this, is to teach every employee how to see a sign. You just don't know, especially if everyone's isolating, and the only visualization you have about somebody's well-being is two-dimensional. It's on a Zoom call or a Teams call. And so we had somebody come in to train every employee to look for signs for people that were experiencing some degree of mental stress or fatigue. The other thing that we did is we created this was the most popular thing we did. We created a release valve, if you will, for every employee. The last Friday of every month is uniformly a day off, even for me. And we talk about what we do on that day. And we thought this was just going to be a release valve, but what it turned out to be was a completely stress-free day. There's something about being on vacation when no one else is. You're still stressed, aren't you? You're still checking your email like, everyone's working but me. When you create a release valve like this, where everyone is off, every employee at Kinaxis have said this is like the #1 benefit of the company, because they're gardening and John's in studio pounding on the drums, and no one feels guilty. It's like a guilt-free day. It's only once a month. Let me tell you, it pays its dividends. I know I've had conversations with the board. There's 2,000 employees times 12 days a year, because that's not vacation day. It's just it's a release valve. Okay, it doesn't take your vacation. The most popular thing we have done for stress relief.
I love it. Yeah. All right, so to follow Michael's lead here and to honor being on time, I just want to thank this extraordinary panel for your insights, your expertise, and thank you to the audience for all of your great questions. And please take the time to come up and connect with each of us. Michael, do you want to set up the break, or I'll move? I always still feel weird being like standing up.
Thank you to Craig as well. Big round of applause for Craig Dowden.
That's good, Soleil. That's why we're all here. As you're getting settled in, just a little bit of background for those of you who don't know me. My name is Priya Balu. I'm COO with TAG HR. I'm also vice chair for OBOT, for the Ottawa Board of Trade. Just a little bit about the Board of Trade, because Suling is not here. She normally does this, but I'm going to try to do my best. I just want to remind you that we are a key advocate for economic growth in our nation's capital. We're passionate about cultivating and thriving a world-class business community, one that drives affordable, inclusive, and sustainable city building. This is why we promote policies and programs at every level of government that create a competitive business environment, and also why we design thought leadership opportunities like we're all seeing today. The main point behind today's session, I'm going to go to, and obviously it's not working, let's see here, is, okay, we're going to, yeah, that's okay. We'll get there eventually, don't worry. So what is going to happen is, in a minute, I'm going to move to the next slide. There is going to be a question about 3 different topics that have to do with talent management, talent recruitment, talent engagement. And I'd like for you at your table to spend the next 10 minutes discussing ideas about how your company or your team is currently tackling this. What we're going to be doing post-event is the OBOT and the Ottawa Business Journal team are going to be taking all of those responses from you, putting them all together, and summarizing them and putting out an actual article so that it'll benefit not only the businesses that are here in the room today. We all know for talent teams how hard it is for us to get away from the office or get away from the home office for a day to actually be here. So we want to be able to take the talent and take the ideas that we get today and share them across the actual board. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to the first question. So this is the first question that has to do with recruitment. So what have you incorporated into your team's recruitment process that has been a game changer this year? So now we're going to try to get some ideas. Do we have a mic going around the room as well? Murillo, you want to do that too? So if you have an idea at your table that you want to raise and you want to share with the room, I've got copies of Craig's books to give out to the brave souls who stand up. We're going to go around to most of the tables. Yeah.
So there's one thing that we actually recently started doing, and I don't have a lot of data on the other side of it to tell you how effective this program is, but we started something called bar raisers at our company. And so what we've started doing and inserting into the interview process is that every time we interview somebody, we have one of our top performers that's not on the hiring team interview them for soft skills and behaviors. And so at the beginning of this program, we started with a bunch of qualitative interviews, tried to collect a bunch of data to understand exactly what sets somebody aside at our company in terms of, you know, like, I guess, specific soft skills and behaviors that really makes them stand out. And so we identified those, we started creating scorecards and question banks, and then we get some of those top performers to be part of it. And I haven't seen all the data on the other side of it, but the idea is, you know, when it's your team, you're the hiring manager, you have a vested interest in filling that bandwidth gap. And so we're really trying to up the level of talent and even reduce the amount of attrition at the organization.
That's amazing, because who better to assess than someone who's done the actual job before, right? To know what type of skills you're sort of looking for. That's amazing. That's fantastic. Thank you. Somebody on this side, Soleil.
So after spending 15 years in recruitment, for those of you that don't know me, that's where I grew up. I was saying that learning is the new loyalty. So the attraction strategy is understanding how to keep people, but understanding that the development of your people is the most important thing that you're going to do to retain them, recruit them, and keep them.
So the City of Ottawa Police Department, I chat with from time to time as I run a lot of youth basketball, and they said attracting and engaging with young racialized recruits from a diverse pool is a real need that they have. So I went about creating a strategy whereby they built a relationship with the Mamba Rec League, which plays at the University of Ottawa. And so the police department provides some sponsorship to it in exchange for being able to kind of go where the people are. And the Mamba Rec League has a huge presence on social media. It's overwhelmingly young newcomers. So it was just an example of like, go where the people are instead of sort of chasing them down. Get out of your comfort zone and engage them. So that was my, game changer idea.
That's fantastic. Mike and I are part of the same tech group, and we had a speaker come in to sort of talk about HR last week. One of the things he talked about was it's very hard to find tradespeople right now. So his recommendation was if you have a trades or if you have a company like a general contractor, set up a competition for a school that develops trade skills for like a shed building contest or something like that. So you bring fun into it. And then when you sponsor the event, you're there running the event, you meet with all of these brand new recruits who are going to be coming out. That's easy peasy recruiting for you. Like you're connecting, you're getting to know them, you're watching how they deal with a time sensitive challenge. It was a fantastic thing that I think a lot of businesses don't necessarily think about.
Hi. Two things in particular. The first one I'm going to say is checking your recruiting processes to see that they're accessible. Mm-hmm. If you use online resume and that's how you eliminate people out, well, make sure that somebody who might have a vision issue can actually use a screen reader to get through your system to put a resume in at all. And then when you get into an interview process, take a look at how you set it up, what you do, whether it's online, what you have. It's making your system available to people who have lots of talent, but also may have a barrier that you need to talk about. And they also need to feel that it's a safe environment where they can tell you about the barrier so that they're not eliminated 10 seconds in the door. Yeah. That'd be my first statement right straight across the board. The second thing, though, is I want to just highlight, I was at, and I've forgotten the name of what we were here for, but we were here and I saw a presentation put on by 3 companies, one from Arnprior, one from Iroquois, and another one locally. But the thing that struck me is these employers were trying to think, how do I get people in? I can't get talent. And the company down in Iroquois was recruiting people, helping local contractors build affordable housing to get their specialized talent in so people had places to go. The company in Arnprior was trying to work with immigration to train people remotely over in Ukraine that had the skill set, train them for what they do, and when they came over, they sponsored them with a job. And they got them a job here. The company in Iroquois was in the process of building a daycare so that their people could work flex hours and have a daycare center to go with it. Now, small businesses can't do that, but a company that can should really think about those added benefits that go with it to give everybody, regardless, an opportunity.
So there's one area that we haven't mentioned yet today, and that has to do with the talent that we have residing in this city that is older. We haven't talked about age inclusivity. And that's something that I think everybody needs to consider. If you look at the demographic change that's going on, we have more people in this country over the age of 65 than under 14. And the fastest growing segment of our population is over the age of 85. So the trend is older. We're never going to have enough immigrants. We're never going to have enough youth because fertility rates are dwindling. So we need to think differently about retaining, recruiting, hiring, and whatnot. Some of the talent that already is here, but they need to repurpose their skills. And all the myths that you hear about them being absent and so on, or taking more time, they've all been refuted. And by building a multi-generational workforce, you sort of got a strategy in place for succession.
Okay, the last one is time kills all deals. So we used to say this in recruitment all the time. So the length of your recruitment process is really critical. If you take too long to recruit, you will lose your talent. So time kills all deals. Speed to decision.
What initiatives or benefits have you introduced to better support employees in achieving a healthy work-life balance? And how did this positively impact your retention rates? Okay, thank you, everybody. Can we get some ideas shared from this last thought-provoking question?
So the group of ladies here have great ideas. One of them mentioned about increasing benefits for mental health, and we're saying that that's a really important thing. That it was, first of all, got to make sure that everybody's aware of it, but that's a really good gesture to show that we value this. We had someone else share about something that their managers do, which is check in with their team and ask very specific questions about to start a conversation about how they're doing in all different aspects of their life. So showing, really, I think that the message from this table that I got is that the demonstrating that the leaders care about their teams really makes a big difference. That they're not just just there to be to get their work done, but that we actually care about you, how you are as a whole person. And I think that's going to be really important. I think thing to make sure all your leaders are aware of that that their job is to take care of these people. So that was the takeaway from this table that I had.
That's awesome, because having a mental health or wellness allowance or budget, it also validates anybody. So if you're suffering, you know that this is a company that takes those concerns seriously. So you also open up the door to have certain conversations, which is extremely empowering for new employees that are coming in, especially coming from old school mentalities where they were kind of forced to not really talk about it. So thank you. That's fantastic. Go ahead.
Just building on that, opening up virtual healthcare to our employees has been huge, right? Saving a single parent 7 hours at CHIO with a kid with an ear infection because they can't get a family doctor in this city has been huge, right? Access to healthcare 24/7, the mental health piece of that as well, because you're not limited to the professionals that are here in the city, right? You can get access 24/7 to somebody to talk to. EAP is great. EAP has definitely struggled, I think, through the pandemic, not having enough professionals available. And I think that's been a game changer, I think, for our employees to be able to access healthcare from their desk, from their home, from wherever at any time.
Actually, this is a good segue for anybody who's from a small business. As an OBOT member, you can join for the insurance options as well. So we're part of the Chamber Plan. The Chamber Plan insurance does include virtual healthcare. So it's fantastic, especially for those people that live in more rural areas where they may not have access or they don't want to commute all the way in. But virtual healthcare is actually included in the Chamber Plan. Thank you to everybody who shared their ideas. We're going to be putting everything together into a bit of a white paper article that will be going out to share the feedback. Also, I wanted to mention that for OBOT, we are going to be doing an actual talent council. So if you are interested in being part of the talent council, the only prerequisite is that you are an actual OBOT member, but we would love to have you. We're going to be setting up quarterly meetings as opportunities for people who are working in the HR or talent management space to come together and share ideas. There might be some initiatives that the government has us working on. There may be some ideas or trends that we're sort of seeing. So if you are interested in joining, we would love to have you.